Howard Cosell had never been afraid of words. For decades, his voice carried into millions of American homes, sharp, unapologetic, and unforgettable. He defended Muhammad Ali when the world called him a traitor. He challenged racial injustice when silence was safer, and he turned sports commentary into something closer to social commentary. Yet one night in 1983, a single sentence ended all of it. The man who once seemed untouchable discovered that even he could be destroyed by just 6 words. The rise of a reluctant broadcaster. Howard William Cohen was born on March 25, 1918, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. But his story quickly moved to Brooklyn, New York, where his parents sought better opportunities. They were Jewish immigrants who had escaped Eastern Europe, clinging to the belief that education was the only way forward. That belief shaped young Howard. He devoured books, argued with classmates, and sharpened his tongue until it was as quick as any fist on the schoolyard. Even as a teenager, he had the kind of confidence that drew both admiration and resentment. By high school, he was already the sports editor of the school paper at Alexander Hamilton High. He didn't write the polite fluff that others churned out. He wrote criticism, bold and direct. He questioned coaching, called out poor play, and made enemies before he even turned 17. But no one could ignore him. That refusal to stay quiet carried him into New York University, where he studied English literature before moving on to law school. It was there that he made a decision that reflected both personal pride and professional calculation. He changed his last name from Cohen to Cosell, claiming it came from his grandfather's original Polish name before immigration officials altered it. It was not only a nod to family roots, but also a way to stand out in a profession where a Jewish surname could be a barrier. Cosell practiced law successfully after World War II, even representing stars like baseball legend Willie Mays. On paper, he was thriving, earning a comfortable income of $25,000 to $30,000 a year. But he wasn't satisfied. The law didn't excite him. He confessed that he lacked sufficient mediocrity to survive in the business. He wanted something louder, more public, more powerful. That desire eventually carried him into radio. In 1953, ABC radio producer Hal Neal offered him an unpaid slot on WABC. The concept was lighthearted. Little league kids interviewing Major League Baseball players. Cosell accepted, working by day as a lawyer and by night as a broadcaster. For nearly 3 years, he earned nothing. But it was enough to plant a seed. During one interview, Yankees outfielder Hank Bauer casually criticized his manager Casey Stengel, and the remark made headlines. Cosell recognized then that honest, unscripted conversation could shake the sports world. That moment shaped everything that followed. By 1956, he committed fully to broadcasting. He left behind light interviews and dove into sports reporting for ABC Radio. Unlike most sports announcers of the era who avoided controversy, Cosell went in swinging. He asked tough questions, pushed athletes on sensitive issues, and refused to back down. Some despised him, others respected him, but everyone paid attention. His reputation grew quickly. He became the most hated man in sports, and at the same time, the conscience of sports broadcasting. His voice, nasal, deliberate, and unforgettable, became impossible to escape. And with it came the famous catchphrase, "This is Howard Cosell telling it like it is." The bond with Muhammad Ali and the power of truth. If one story defined Howard Cosell's career, it was his bond with Muhammad Ali. When the young boxer first announced in 1964 that he would no longer be Cassius Clay but Muhammad Ali, almost everyone in the media refused to recognize the change. Newspapers clung to Clay, broadcasters avoided Ali, and much of America treated his new name as a joke. But not Cosell. On national television, he said it clearly. Muhammad Ali. He didn't care about the backlash, the angry letters, or the threats. He knew what it meant for a man to claim his identity in a country that punished difference. Cosell, the Jewish kid from Brooklyn who grew up knowing prejudice, refused to deny Ali his dignity. That loyalty was tested again when Ali refused induction into the U.S. Army in 1967, citing his faith and his opposition to the Vietnam War. The punishment was brutal. Ali was stripped of his heavyweight title, banned from boxing, and branded a coward by much of the press. Sponsors pulled out. The government pressed charges. And while nearly everyone condemned him, Cosell did not. On air, he called the banishment inhumane and illegal. He said the government was punishing Ali for his beliefs, while wealthy white draft dodgers faced no consequences. He did what no other broadcaster would. He defended Ali when it seemed like career suicide. The result was one of the most enduring partnerships in American sports. For nearly 20 years, Ali and Cosell sparred in front of cameras, their interviews a mixture of teasing, argument, and deep respect. Ali mocked Cosell's hairpiece, called him arrogant, and even joked that he should be arrested for air pollution. Cosell rolled his eyes, shot back with sarcasm, and kept the exchanges sharp. Beneath the banter was trust. Ali once admitted that Cosell gave him a voice when the world tried to silence him. Cosell, in turn, said that Ali had made him more than just a broadcaster. Together, they forced America to confront race, religion, and war, not with fists, but with words. Monday Night Football and the burden of fame. By 1970, Cosell had already established himself as a fearless radio and television voice, but his career reached a new level when ABC executive Roone Arledge made a gamble that would change sports television forever. He brought Howard Cosell into the booth for the brand-new experiment called Monday Night Football. At the time, football broadcasts were straightforward and polite, narrated by former players or safe, smooth announcers. Cosell was the opposite, opinionated, combative, and theatrical. Arledge wanted sparks, and Cosell delivered. The first season was a sensation. Ratings jumped nearly 50%. Audiences weren't just tuning in for the games, they were tuning in for the show. The trio of Cosell, former quarterback Don Meredith, and the calm ex-star Frank Gifford became a television institution. Cosell brought drama, Meredith added humor, and Gifford balanced the chaos with steadiness. It worked. By the early 1970s, ABC was charging $65,000 for a single minute of advertising during the broadcast, a staggering figure for the time. But fame carried its own cost. Cosell became as polarizing in football as he had been in boxing. His blunt critiques of players and coaches drew both praise and venom. Bars and living rooms across America divided into Team Cosell and Team Meredith. Their on-air clashes felt unscripted and real, which only drew more attention. For Cosell, the booth wasn't just a place to call touchdowns, it was a stage. His catchphrase, "He could go all the way," turned ordinary plays into memorable moments. He wove in backstories about players, treating football not as a scoreboard, but as human drama. Behind the scenes, though, the stress showed. Cosell was drinking heavily, sometimes before and even during broadcasts. In November 1970, in Philadelphia, he reportedly drank several martinis before going live, slurred the city's name, and then vomited on Don Meredith's boots. Viewers were stunned, and whispers about his drinking never faded. By 1984, even his colleague Al Michaels confronted him bluntly, "You're ruining the telecast." The brilliance of Cosell's commentary was always shadowed by his unpredictability. Fame had given him power, but it also magnified every weakness. Feuds, Lennon's death, and cracks in the armor. For all his success, Howard Cosell was never without enemies. His sharp tongue made him a constant target for other journalists. Sports columnist Dick Young called him Howie the Fraud and even tried to sabotage his interviews by shouting obscenities during tapings. Cosell fired back just as hard, branding Young a right-wing cultural illiterate. Their feud became legendary. Not just a clash of personalities, but a battle between the old guard of newspapers and the rising power of television. To Cosell, it wasn't just personal. It was a war over the future of sports media. He clashed with broadcasters, too. Chris Economaki, the voice of motorsports, once said Cosell had the biggest ego he had ever seen. Even small slights became grudges for Cosell. At holiday parties or press events, he would bring up old mistakes and never let them go. Jimmy Cannon mocked him for changing his name from Cohen to Cosell, even sneering at his toupee. The insults only made him more polarizing, but they also added to the myth. Howard Cosell was impossible to ignore. Yet beneath the arrogance was insecurity. He often worried about being disliked, about being replaced. He once admitted that only Frank Sinatra received more negative press than he did. Many of his tirades, colleagues later recalled, were less about pride than about fear. The voice that roared on air came from a man who, privately, questioned his own place. Still, there were moments that proved Cosell was more than a provocateur. On December 8, 1980, during the closing minutes of a Monday night football game between the Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots, he received confirmation that John Lennon had been shot outside his New York apartment. Cosell hesitated. It wasn't sports, it was tragedy. But Frank Gifford insisted he had to tell the country. And so Cosell delivered the news live, his voice heavy and deliberate. This is just a football game. An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News. John Lennon, shot twice in the back, dead on arrival. Millions of Americans learned of Lennon's death from Cosell, and for once, no one argued with him. That night, he wasn't just a broadcaster. He was the nation's messenger of grief. The Alvin Garrett incident and the collapse of a career. The night of September 5, 1983, was supposed to be another showcase for Monday Night Football. The Dallas Cowboys faced the Washington Redskins, and millions tuned in. But what fans remember most wasn't the touchdowns or the score. It was Howard Cosell's words. As Washington wide receiver Alvin Garrett broke a tackle for a first down, Cosell's voice cut through the air. "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" 6 words that would ignite a storm, powerful enough to end a legendary career. The reaction was immediate. BC's phone lines flooded with angry viewers. Comparing a black athlete to a monkey was a racial insult too familiar and too raw to be dismissed. Civil rights leaders, including Reverend Joseph Lowery of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, demanded a public apology and action from the network. Editorials, radio shows, and TV panels denounced Cosell. Within hours, his reputation as a fearless but respected commentator was hanging by a thread. Cosell tried to defend himself. At first, he even denied saying the words at all. But the tapes proved otherwise, and when pressed, he explained that he had meant nothing racist. To him, "little monkey" was a phrase he used to describe agility and quickness. He pointed to earlier broadcasts, where he used the same term for white players like Mike Adamle, even reminding critics that he affectionately used the phrase with his grandchildren. Alvin Garrett himself publicly said he took no offense, and Muhammad Ali stood by his old friend. Jesse Jackson and other civil rights leaders also noted Cosell's long record of defending black athletes, from his support of the 1968 Olympic protest to his unwavering defense of Ali during the Vietnam War years. But none of it mattered. The outrage was bigger than nuance. In a cultural moment when race and language carried explosive weight, the explanation couldn't save him. Cosell later called Monday Night Football a stagnant bore, but the truth was that the Alvin Garrett incident had broken him. By the end of the 1983 season, Howard Cosell stepped away from the booth, walking out on the very stage he had helped to build. Aftermath, decline, and the final goodbye. Leaving Monday Night Football should have been the start of a quieter chapter, But Howard Cosell wasn't built for silence. In 1984, he launched Sports Beat, a 30-minute weekly program that he would later call his favorite project. Unlike the chaos of live football, Sports Beat gave him control. He explored serious issues in sports with depth and honesty, and the show earned critical praise and Emmy Awards. For a brief moment, it looked as if Cosell had found redemption, but controversy followed him like a shadow. In 1985, he released his memoir, I Never Played the Game, a book filled with sharp and often unflattering portraits of his colleagues at ABC. The reaction was swift. Former allies turned on him, executives felt betrayed, and the network pulled Sports Beat off the air. The show that had felt like his second chance ended almost as quickly as it began. After that, Cosell returned to radio, the medium where he had first discovered his voice. But even there, the fire was fading. By the early 1990s, his personal life unraveled. His beloved wife, Emmy, whom he had married during World War II and relied on for nearly half a century, passed away in 1990. Friends and family said he was never the same. Without her, his health collapsed. In 1991, at age 73, doctors discovered a tumor in his chest. He underwent surgery, but recovery was slow and painful. Cancer was only one battle. He also faced heart disease, Parkinson's, and a series of minor strokes. By 1992, just 6 months after surgery, he retired for good. The man who once dominated America's airwaves spent his final years in quiet decline. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell died in New York at the age of 77 from a heart embolism. The news barely registered compared to the scandals of his past. Some obituaries hailed him as a pioneer, the conscience of sports journalism. Others dismissed him as arrogant and divisive. Honors trickled in: the Television Hall of Fame in 1994, a posthumous Sports Emmy in 1996, induction into both the International Boxing Hall of Fame and the American Sportscasters Hall of Fame. They were acknowledgments of a legacy forever complicated by brilliance and controversy. In the end, Howard Cosell had changed sports broadcasting forever, but a single night in 1983 ensured he would never escape tragedy. Howard Cosell lived as a man who told the truth, even when it cost him everything. But his career ended with 6 words that he never could take back. Do you think the outrage was justified, or was Howard Cosell unfairly destroyed by one mistake? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories from the world of sports and entertainment.